Now it's my pleasure to introduce Colin Stephenson. We all know him, Newsday, Twitter universe. Testing, testing. The mic is on, Colin. I know it's World Cup time, so we're going to keep this short, but I want to know how you're doing otherwise. Knicks championship and World Cup at the same time.
Yeah, it's really really super hectic. I was fortunate enough to be in the house for Game Four, right? Like they asked me or assigned me to be part of that, covering some of the home games and stuff. So I did get a piece of it at the end there. I wasn't on the whole run, but I was there for the best part. So that was kind of cool. And and now as you know, I'm a big soccer guy, World Cup guy, and World Cup is the best time. Although I think this one might be a little bit, too many teams. Like they've jumped from 32 teams to 48 teams or whatever it was. And there's a lot of games, man. So I can't watch all of them. I got to get other stuff done during the day. You know what I mean? Otherwise I'd be sitting there watching every second of every game. But you can't do that. There's just too much.
A little bit of scoreboard watching. I won't blame you on that. And I'm so happy to hear that you were in the building to see a championship at the Garden, or at least a championship series. So with that, we have to turn our attention to the Rangers, unfortunately. And you just mentioned that you collaborated on a mock draft. You did some research on that. What are you gathering from this? Or will you be in person at the draft, or is it all now remote?
No, I won't be there. They're going with a last year and this year they've gone with a decentralized draft is what they're calling it. So what that means is in the old days everybody went to the draft, and now I think that the teams are staying in their home bases and their headquarters and stuff, and maybe just send a representative. But like the GMs and the scouts and all are on their respective campuses, and so there's no it's not necessary to go really because you're doing everything. All the interviews that we're going to do are going to be via phone or teleconference. So I'll be watching the draft on television like most everyone else. Last year, actually, Andrew Gross, our Islanders writer, did go to LA because the Islanders had the first pick. The Rangers were in the lottery for the first pick this year, and instead of going up 2 spots to get number one, they went back 2 spots to fall down to number five. So no reason for me to go to Buffalo this year. I'll be, in the comfort of my own home.
No, and good for you. Obviously, plenty of time on the road, and I'm sure it was not as easy to, cover the team as it was this year. My question for you was, my uncle gave us some old newspapers we have hanging up now down here in Mugno HQ, and I saw your name in one of those papers, and it was part of those '94
Oh yeah,
newspapers.
yeah, I
And
was there.
what came to mind was this season. Where would you rank it? Like worst seasons that you've covered? Like where does it compare to those 2000s thin lean years?
Well, I mean, I did hockey in the '90s, and then I sort of went away, and I was out of the hockey world for a number of years. I did some general assignment work. I also left the business for a few years. I was asked to leave. I was downsized out of the business for a few years before getting back in. So I don't know. I can't really speak to some of those lean years that those I did see them in 1997, which was the last year they had made the playoffs before before the lockout that what is it 04 05 lockout. They came back in 2005, Henrik Lundqvist's rookie year, and made the playoffs. That was their first time, when they got in 2006. It was their first time in, I guess, like 9 years that they'd been in the playoffs. So I did see them that last year they made it, and I did see them that first year they made it back, and the years in between, I didn't see them at all. I didn't have to watch that, so I can't necessarily compare 05 06 to whatever 98 99 or what have you, um, but I can tell you that since I've been back on the team, which is 2018, right after the original letter and the original rebuild. This was the most disappointing season. Absolutely the most. in 2018, they'd had a run. They'd gone to the finals in 2014, I guess it was, and they'd made it to the Eastern Conference Finals a couple of years. They'd given it a shot. They were bringing in guys at the trade deadline every year, and every year they had a shot for a long, long time. And finally, and I guess in that 17-18 season, they realized that the time had come to rebuild, and they did what was pretty innovative thing at the time, and I think very well received by Ranger fans, which was the original letter. I mean, they put out this letter and just explained to the fans, like, hey, listen, we've done this for a long time, and we've got to face the facts, and we're gonna rebuild, and it's gonna take a while, and every Ranger fan I knew, whether it was people on Twitter, or social media, or just people I know in my life who are Ranger fans. Like, everybody appreciated that. Everybody appreciated, understood, and was like, yeah, you know what, it's right, it's time. And it was sad to see some of those guys go. I remember, when Zuccarello got traded a year later, Henrik Lundqvist was crying and all this kind of stuff. But everybody understood that it was something that needed to be done, right? The team needed a refresh, and there was, the organization had, was straight up with the fans and honest with the fans as to what was to come. And so, yeah, the team was bad, after, that trade deadline. And it was bad in 2018-19. But I think, and maybe people didn't watch, but I think people understood, and it really kind of built when you saw them, what they were doing. They were selling off pieces and collecting, draft picks, additional draft picks, young prospects. I mean, you think at that first trade deadline, they got Ryan Lindgren, they got Brett Howden. These are, prospects that they got, guys that they had scouted in previous years, but didn't have the draft picks to take. Because they were trading draft picks to try and, get veterans at the deadline all the time. So, they brought those guys in. They got some picks. The one year they had 3 first-round picks. They drafted Keandre Miller. They drafted Niels Lundqvist. They drafted, they drafted what's the Kravtsov. And they knew that they weren't all going to pan out, but they collected all these draft picks, and you could see the strategy. You could see what they were doing, and you could understand it. And so I think people tolerated it. And I don't think anyone was angry. But they were excited when they started to see things turn around, right? When they started to see, okay, hey, 2019, they win the lottery, get number 2, they take Kako. 2020, they win the lottery again. They get, they get Lafreniere. Summer of 2019, they trade for Trouba, and they trade for Fox, and they sign Panarin as a free agent. And you could see them building, and there was a tremendous excitement. And obviously, it went the way it went. They surprised everybody, and by getting to the Eastern Conference Final, probably ahead of schedule in 2022. Got there again in 2024, and then this, kind of just collapsed that came out of nowhere. And I think people are mad, man. People are mad in a way that they weren't mad in 2018-19. They just, so yeah, it's, you're going to miss the playoffs, and that's fine. But, I guess it's the expectations going in that really make it hurt more.
No, that was a great summary of that entire period of time. And I think rational too. Like, I think right now it's so hot and cold, like you had mentioned online with the reactions to the last 2 years. So I really liked how you kind of capped all of that off. And part of that success, Henrik Lundqvist era, now Igor Shesterkin, who signed that massive deal, was goaltending coach Benny Allaire.
Yeah,
Did you ever really speak to him, or was he someone that was really not accessible to the media?
he was not accessible to us for interview purposes, but he was a wonderful man. We always, you know, you would talk to him, you would say hello in passing and stuff. On the road, sometimes you might see him at a hotel bar, and you might buy you a beer or something like that. So I mean, we could talk to him about things that had nothing to do with the Rangers goaltending. I would talk to him about
Mhm.
growing up in northern Quebec and skiing and things that had nothing to do with Lundqvist or Alexander Georgiev or Igor or whoever. So he was a good man, and I think we all liked him very much, and obviously the goalies that he coached revered him. So good man all around. Sad to see him go. Um, wish him all the best in his retirement. I can't say that I know the new goalie coach as well because again, we're not allowed to interview the assistant coaches. We get the head coach, and that's all we get. We get the general manager, I don't know, a handful of times a year. Um, and the Rangers, are pretty guarded and restrictive about who they let us talk to, and so we don't have that kind of access. I mean, I don't know. Jeff Malcolm seems like a very nice guy. Say hello to him and stuff, but I don't know much about him.
No, and I think that's also important for viewers to listen and hear because from my very limited experience in the room, it was the same way. And a lot of times when people ask me about that experience, I say something similar where it's just the way Madison Square Garden carries and conducts their business. And fans are upset sometimes to hear that there isn't the access for our reporters. And it's just the way it is, right? So I do think that's important because what I was going to ask was how you think Allaire's retirement might play into next season, but part of this is also about how much accessibility you have. So with that said, how different do you expect the team to look going into next season? Like by training camp, do you expect it to be a big shift, or do you think this is going to be just more tearing down versus rebuilding?
I think it's going to look different, right? I mean, I clearly we saw a bunch of guys at the latter part of the season, and injuries played a part and allowed some young guys to get some looks. Matt Rempe missed most of the year, so that opened up some ice time in the bottom six. Adam Edstrom missed most of the year, again opening up some more ice time in the bottom six. So you had some young guys come up, and you had Yaroslav Khmelash, and he looked good in the time that we saw him. They claimed Ty Cartier off waivers. He looked good. They brought up my favorite guy, Adam Sikora. I love that kid. I love the energy that he brings, and I like his game too. Not just his personality, but I like what I see on the ice. So you got a chance to see all those guys, and so they're not all going to be on the team this season, right? I mean, there's only so much room for fourth line guys, right? So between Kamalash and Sikora and Rempe and Edstrom and Cartier and all these other guys, there's only room for so many of them. They're not all going to be here. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think that the team, organically is going to look different. But I also, we all know that likely they're going to trade Vincent Trocek, right? I mean, it's almost a done deal. I think we all expect that to happen. It can happen any day. Um, and so when they trade him, obviously it's a big piece coming out of their locker room. They've already traded Artemi Panarin, as you know, so that's a big piece out of the locker room. They have to figure out how they're going to replace. Well, they can't replace what he gave them, but at least approximate what he gave them, or kind of make up somehow for a portion of what he gave them. So I mean, it is going to be a different looking team, and I think too with the, you know, assuming again we all assume they're going to trade Trocheck. We'll have to see what they get back for him. I mean, I think the idea. And part of the reason why they didn't trade Trocheck at the deadline in March is because they wanted players back. They didn't just want picks, and they didn't want just picks and minor league guys who might be here 3 years down the road. Um, they wanted players who could step into their lineup right away. So necessarily when they trade, I suppose I should say if and when, but presumably when they trade Trocheck, you move out a big a guy who's a big part of the locker room now, and then you're going to replace him with somebody that's going to step in and be in the lineup. So they will look different just from that standpoint. We think also they're probably looking to deal and willing to deal Braden Schneider. Um, I don't know what they would get for Braden Schneider. Maybe more picks. They could be very active. At the draft. The draft is coming up next weekend as we speak. So maybe they'll trade and get some picks, and then who knows? There's all kinds of possibilities. But yeah, I do expect the team to look different. We know that Jonathan Quick has retired, so that's one guy we know isn't coming back. We presume that Dylan Garand, who's been in the system, he was a 2020, I think, draft pick, or maybe 2019, I forget now. But he's been in the system a long time, paid his dues down in Hartford, worked his way up. He was the number 3 guy this past season, and now Jonathan Quick has retired, so we presume he'll be the number 2 guy, although he is out of contract. He's a restricted free agent, so we'll have to see if they offer him a contract, they bring him back, or if they go get a veteran to be the backup. So so yeah, I mean, it's the team's gonna look differently, very different than what it did this past season.
And lastly, uh, this question I haven't had the chance to ask anyone yet, but it's one that intrigues me the most. Which young player is positioned to take the next step with the either number 5 pick coming into the lineup at some point, or free agency, or a trade? Is there a young player that you could see benefiting from this offseason the most?
Well, I mean, the obvious one would be Gabe Perreault, right? I mean, we saw him. I mean, unless I don't know what, I don't want to assume that you assume that he's a regular now. I mean, he came in and the second half of the season certainly showed everybody, the traits that they saw in him, which is why they made him a first round pick in 2023. I liked what I saw. I'm sure you did too. I mean, just about everybody liked what they saw about, from Gabe. And especially to me, when I talk about them moving on from Artemi Panarin, a creative player, they don't have enough creative players for my liking, right? I mean, they've got a bunch of guys that skate up and down in straight lines, and play, kind of standard, basic hockey. And I think you need, in your mix, in your bag, in your lineup, you need somebody that's creative enough to see things that other people don't see, or try things that other people won't try. And I think Gabe is one of those types of players. And now, obviously, he showed us quite a bit in the last couple months of the season. We like what we saw. Now we need him to take the next step in doing that from day one, from October, and keeping that going for a whole season, right? I mean, he didn't look great in training camp last season. He looked okay in training camp. They sent him down to Hartford, started the season down there. Got recalled, didn't impress, got recalled the second time, and kind of finally seemed to fit in, I guess, and start doing the things that they need him to do. And we need him to do that, from day one and over the course of 82 games. So that would be the number 1 guy. But, beyond that, if you're assuming Gabe is a regular and you're looking for some other name, then, I would say, Schmelash is a guy that really excited a lot of people with what he did and how he finished the season. And so I'd like to see him. And, I'm assuming you don't count Ty Cartier because, he's not 21. He's not a rookie. He's not a second-year player. He's been around the league now for a few years. He is still in his 20s. He's going to get a shot to get some ice time here. We like what we saw from him when, the Rangers claimed him off of waivers from Seattle, I guess it was. So I think that, he's still a young player, although not a rookie or a second-year player. So if those kinds of people are the people that you're looking at, I would say Gabe, unless you don't count Gabe. But if not, then I would say let's see, what what Schmelash can do with this opportunity. He's going to have to beat some people out. I mean, Rempe's coming back off injury. Adam Edstrom's coming back off injury. Those guys, have been there before and have shown it before for a different coach, albeit. Um, but we know what those guys can do when they're playing well. So Kamalash is going to have to, beat somebody out to get some time. But I think it's possible, and I'm excited to see what he can bring.
Thank you so much, Colin. And lastly, who you got in the World Cup? Who do you think is going to win the World Cup this year?
Uh, well, it's wide open, of course. A lot of people, France is the heavy favorite. And I would say France and Spain are the top two. A lot of people think Argentina, who's the defending champion, would be right up there and one of the favorites. I have my doubts about that. I think it's tough to repeat. Um, uh, England brought a good team; they're strong, but I'm going with Brazil.
I
Which
love it.
is which a lot of people probably don't agree with because they're old, they're kind of in transition, and their results haven't been great. They didn't start off great. They had a draw in their first match, but I do still think that they're still Brazil, right? And the last time the World Cup was here in the United States, they won it all. So I think that it's weird to think of Brazil as a dark horse or an underdog, but that's kind of how I view them now, and they're my pick for better or worse.
I love it. All right, he's taking Brazil. You heard everything you have to for the offseason from Colin, and we'll be checking in, I'm sure, some point down the line with you, Colin. Thanks for joining.
Anytime, man. You got my number. You know when to reach me whenever you need me. I'm here.
And our next guest needs no introduction, Jonny Lazarus. Thanks for joining me today, man.
What's up, Maddie? I actually I don't know if I texted you or not, but a couple weeks ago I was in Carolina. I tweeted out like I'm looking to play a roller hockey game, and I had someone reach out to me in North Carolina, and his name is Matt Mugno. I'm not sure if you're familiar. There's a Matt Mugno who has New York ties, lives in North Carolina, is a huge Canes fan. You guys like have to connect. He actually owns a hockey shop called Primo X out there. You guys definitely got a link. That was on me. I should have texted you that if I didn't.
I love it. Well, first of all, you were very busy in the Stanley Cup final in the best way, like highs and lows. But I do know that there is another Matt Mugno in hockey
Mhm.
because his photo on Venmo, he's with the Stanley Cup. So everybody sends Venmo to him, and then I have to
I think
like
that's how I
DM
met him.
him.
I think that's how I met him. I think I might have Venmoed.
The first time,
I
I
think
think you
so,
sent
or
me
something
a
like that.
Venmo.
Yeah, something like
Yep.
that. Yeah.
So it's not the first nor the last time that's happened. So other Matt Mugno out there, man, shout out, great
Yeah.
last name. You've now in some way met Jonny and I, so lucky you. But Jonny, obviously Rangerland is like the toughest thing to talk about. So unfortunately, I
Mhm.
have to like pull you back in
It's okay.
from all the excitement of like the Larkin conversation and the Brady Kachuk conversation. But I loved what you said about Jim Hiller. Obviously goes to Toronto, Peter Laviolette now in LA, Temi Panarin in LA. Do you think that's like a surefire Vincent Trocheck location that he'll end up?
So I think that's what makes the most sense for Vinny as a player, but I don't know if the Rangers can get enough of a return from LA. Like again, like I'm not super familiar with their prospect pool. Obviously, we already got Liam Greentree in the Panarin trade. I think Alex Laferriere like would make the most sense in a return. The Rangers need to get younger, and they need like somewhat of high end skill, mixed with youth. And Laferriere is probably the one guy right now, if it's not Quentin Byfield, that like fits that mold. And again, the Kings have first rounders for the next 3 years, including the one coming up on Friday, so they can get Laferriere and a pick. I don't know if the return on Vinny is going to be as high as what we're seeing or what we're hearing, but just because his value, I think, was higher at the deadline for a team like LA who was looking to go up against Colorado. Like they could have used a guy like him then. Not saying they can't use that now, but Vinny's value to me felt the highest at the deadline. And not that it's not high right now. I'm kind of like talking in circles, but LA, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I just don't know if there's enough of a return for the Rangers there and what
All
they're
right, here's
looking
the big
for.
thing I want to jump to. I wanted to piggyback off of kind of the conversation you had, obviously, with MCH the last 2 days about Trocheck, and you throwing that opinion out before idea. But I want to know Johnny's best case and worst case scenario for the Rangers this offseason? I feel like I've heard so many different things here and there, but like if you could summarize your idea of like the best case for the Rangers or the worst case, what would that be?
Oh man, that's tough. I'd say worst case is they don't do anything. Um, I again I'll preach it. Like the Rangers need to get younger. Like that is the biggest thing. And I think that's what's stopping guys from wanting to come here because you look down the lineup, the Rangers' best players are either 30 and older or right around 30. Like, Foxy obviously is, I think, turning 29. So he's not 30 yet, but he's like in his peak years. It's not promising for the future. He's got 3 years left on his deal, which is a good amount of time. But the direction of the Rangers is, I think, what is confusing everyone around the league. Like, who are the young prospects? Who are the up and coming guys that are going to be the next wave of New York Rangers that are going to keep them competitive or make them competitive or turn them into a contender? Like, it's not really there right now. You can look at Gabe, you can look at Drew Fortescue, and while those are good prospects and good young guys, are those the guys who are going to be, and this is a crazy stretch, but like, do you have a Macklin Celebrini coming? Who are they going to take with this fifth overall pick? Like, is it going to be a guy who can be the guy? Because right now, I don't know if they have one of those guys. We kind of thought Panarin was the guy. And I think come playoff time, like it wasn't necessarily a position where he puts the team on his back. And I'm not knocking him because I think he did so many great things here, but that's just the God's honest truth. Like he wasn't a guy. And listen, I think from what we've seen, Stanley Cup champions in the past few years don't just have one guy; they have quite a few, and you need quite a few.
Hmm.
So I need to see some sort of direction, I guess. Like the best case scenario is seeing some sort of direction and getting younger guys in, and the worst case scenario is status quo. Like that's what I'll say. I've actually, you know what, Maddie, I've had so many conversations, and I've been Team Igor for so long. I always like
Yeah.
have been, but I have like been a little bit open to the idea of if things hit the fan this year, maybe trying to trade him. Like if this team's not going to be a legit Stanley Cup contender, what is the point of having the best goalie in the league, paying him a lot if they're not going to go anywhere with it? So I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm very torn. I think as a fan, I feel stuck. I think covering the team, I'm questioning the direction like everyone else is. Um, but I'm not also like looking at the season and saying, what's the point? I think there are things you can look for and, feel good about if things do go right. Like the Rangers, as shitty as it was last year, I think they're 1 point out of the playoffs, like at the Winter Classic, you know,
Hmm.
just a lot of things went wrong.
No, you know what? I like I think you and I are in the same boat about the Igor situation. Like, I do think a lot of the noise outside of that, I feel like that conversation always revolves around, um, obviously the money, but the understanding that if you have a great player, you keep them, especially for your job, if you're the management group, but also because you want to compete with that player to win, right? I feel like the conversations right now around the Leafs are like, we have to convince Matthews to stay. The
Yeah.
way you convince him to stay is to compete. So if they're not going to compete, I totally understand that. I like that you threw that idea out there, but you're an optimist too. I'm naturally an
Yeah.
optimist. What's one thing you're optimistic about in the next week with the Rangers?
In the next week, um, well, it's who they take. It's who they take in the draft. I think for me, the two names that I'm thinking, I guess, are more likely than not from everything I've read and seen is Caleb Malhotra and Carson Carrolls. I know Albert Smiths is like a name that I see a lot on Twitter and Vigo Bjork. Not sure if the Rangers are going to go in those directions. I'm not really sure what they're going to do, to be honest. But the good news is, and what I feel good about, is that to me, it feels like they can't really mess this one up. They need a young center and they need a young, skilled puck moving defenseman, and they're going to have an option at least one of those at 5. So I guess that is the positive thing. And if they decide to trade that pick for a guy like, let's say, Matthew Nyes, that is also something I'm fine with. Matthew Nyes is a young, promising guy in this league who I think plays the right style of hockey. So I look at this situation, I look at this week, and I think there is no way for them to mess this up. So that's what I'm positive about. Also, just now got a notification that Simone Nemitz is being traded to Calgary. So that's something that is certainly to look for here. I wonder if
Okay, on air. I didn't.
I wonder if the Devils are now trading up in the draft because I think Calgary has 6.
Yeah, listen, if you got to go, by all means, I'm
No,
sure.
you're good. We actually just recorded Tri-State, so we're
Oh,
an hour too late.
that's it's just the way it goes.
I might have to tweet though, really quickly if I
Yeah,
can.
go
So
for it.
you talk.
Listen, Johnny All-Star, my guy. No, it's funny. I try and keep these tight, so it's funny when I don't think I've ever had something break. Steve and I always record before something happens, but that'll be interesting. I mean, we try and touch upon other things too on the show, but um, obviously that's pretty big news out of New Jersey world, and that usually, like you said, means something else is coming, like with the Sam Miskevich trade. What was that, 2 days ago now? But it's funny. I also think the conversation. I loved you guys interview Gallant because I feel like this offseason might be a little bit of a tough one to get through with Ranger podcasting. So um, I have a few more more rapid fire, not as deep
yeah,
questions, just
hit me.
gauging your interest.
You
But
know I'm all game.
like, do you think they're going to utilize the cap space, or do you think they're just going to try and coast this offseason out?
I actually think they might end up going after Alex Tuck if he makes it to market. Like I
Gotcha.
don't know if that's the right thing to do or the best thing to do, but I can see them doing it. You know, I know
Did
that's
you play against him or knew him from camps?
I played on a line with him. I actually don't think he would remember me. I just remember him because like he was sick. I was playing double A, but I played on a line with him at New York State camp one year. I think it was like 2009. And that was like the best New York State camp I ever had. Like I think I had like 7 points in 3 games or something. He must have had like 12 points in 3 games. Like my dad would just get every time I got off the ice, my dad was like, just keep playing on his line. Like that guy's sick. Like just keep playing with him, keep playing with him. But like being in the locker room with him, like I remember all those things just because again, like when I was younger, you know, I was like the late bloomer. So I was like mesmerized by all the guys who were just nasty at hockey. Like I just thought they were the coolest thing. And he was like one of those guys.
Wow. I feel like as the offseason has gone on, the more room has been left to like ruminate about these moves. And like I was so gung ho to be like, listen, they need a top 6 or they need this, but I just feel like at what point is it a long-term rebuild, like copycat league? And I feel like Carolina and Montreal can't be printed. I feel like their situations are very unique. So I feel like the Rangers are left in such a tough spot, like this
Yeah.
offseason, but also just like in what direction to go.
Yeah. That's that's the $1 million question, right? I mean, I don't have the answer. I don't think many people have the answer. You know, people throw ideas out there, but it's so hard to execute it.
Mhm. Um, lastly, before I also want to hear your thoughts on the Knicks parade because obviously I think that's pretty sick that you got down there.
Do you want to hear the
Is
return
there
quick? Elliot Friedman just tweeted out the
go
Nemeth
for it.
return. Sorry,
Yeah.
let me just grab it for you. May as well do this while we're live, right? So it's Nemeth and Siplikov for a second round pick, which belongs to the Rangers this year, a Vegas first in 2027, Colorado first in 2028, both top 10 protected, and Etienne Morin, who I don't know who that is. But that's what the return is. So I
Interesting.
wonder if the Devils are going to use those picks to load up on something else. But yeah, interesting.
That is really interesting.
Two,
I
two,
mean, you guys
two
have been talking about him for months.
yeah, two firsts and a second for Nemeth and Siplikov. That's basically what it is.
Do you think that's good off the bat?
Not sure what Calgary is thinking there. No, I'm not a fan of that for Calgary. To be honest, but we'll see. All
I mean,
right, sorry. Yeah, what was the question? Sorry.
no worries, John. You're so funny. I don't even remember what I was saying. Knicks parade. How
Next
was that?
parade, epic. So epic. I mean, I barely even got to see the float, but like the city that day was just everyone hugging, everyone happy, Knicks jerseys everywhere. Like I was downtown at 8 a.m. and there was millions of people down there already. You couldn't even find an open spot, which just gives you so much hope for one day doing that in a Ranger jersey or something, right? Like it was so cool. I've never seen or felt that way about New York City before. Like, it's always like people gathering when tragedy happens and to be in the city and gather people just to celebrate and nothing matters. It was awesome.
No, that is special, man. Well, listen, enjoy the draft. I don't want to take up any more of your time. So safe travels out there, and hopefully we'll get some more good content out of you. You doing any like interviews with the prospects and stuff?
Yeah, actually, I'm hosting a show for the NHL, like the backstage show for the first round with
Cool.
Kate Pedersen, and I think actually with Matthew Schaefer, which would be super cool. So
Oh, that'll be
we'll be talking to
awesome.
the guys, yeah, like right after they're picked, which would be sweet. And then I'll be doing stuff for the USHL, so that's what I got planned for the draft.
Cool. Awesome, Johnny.
Any
Well,
big summer plans? Any big summer plans for you?
Portugal with the family.
Sick.
Hopefully all goes good in the hockey space over the summer.
Yeah.
Maybe
Keep
not just for the
grinding.
Rangers, but for the broadcasting stuff. So, but otherwise, no, like just working the odd jobs and getting by. So,
Well, keep it up, man. You're grinding. Seriously, it'll all pay off. I mean that.
yes, sir. No, I know. Listen, you believed in me, man. That helped me get to where I'm at. So,
Always.
thanks, Johnny, for coming on. I know we'll talk to you at some point, I'm sure, after all the dust settles this offseason.
You got it, Matt. Happy to hop on whenever.
Well, it's not a summer block party without Broadway Block. You've probably seen their memes on the internet, their reels, their content's blown up. They had me on their show when they were just about getting things off the ground. I believe that was like year 2 or 3 for you guys. And it's been an honor to see you guys take flight. So it's awesome to finally have you guys on the show. Joe, Steve, Broadway Block, ready to talk some summer action. How are you guys doing post Stanley Cup final?
We're doing great. Optimistic, that's always me and Steve's thing. We always like to think that, things are not as bad as they seem. Obviously, we've talked on our show about the 2026 free agency class kind of being a weaker class and that we need some kind of trade to happen. But what we've just found out is like, there's really not much trade action going to happen with the Rangers. I kind of think it's going to be a youth movement this year. And I feel like we're going to be a little flatter this season, but I feel like that's going to give some of these younger guys a more relaxed atmosphere as opposed to, look at how Cackle and Laugh came up that they were expected to fit in with this great group of guys and just didn't live up to expectations. And now where it's kind of like we've seen teams like Montreal and even the Islanders when they took a step back that the expectations weren't that high and that they kind of got more out of those young guys and better play from people than you're not expecting to.
Yeah, I mean, like Joe said, we're I think a little bit too optimistic sometimes. I feel like I made a point to say that I don't believe that the Rangers make the playoffs this upcoming season. However, I do think that you can make a few good steps in the right direction with the youth. Some players that we've gotten to see mature a little bit and come up. Obviously, holding a top 5 draft pick that could change things quite a bit. Probably best to not heap all this pressure and let them develop. As Rangers fans know, we have a tendency to let them kind of sink or swim, and usually the former rather than the latter. So I feel like right now the only thing that could happen that would be in our best benefit is I don't think they make the playoffs, but I do think that they could make this conversation a little bit better for us all moving forward. If they manage to get into like just missing the playoffs would be ideal. Being just outside, we saw what happened with the Islanders. They still get a lotto pick even though they've just missed the playoffs. And I think now after watching a really terrible season, Canucks fans especially, watching a miserable season, and then you don't win the lotto, right? So you have the worst record by far in the league, and the Canucks, they don't win the lotto. We have the third worst record in the league. We don't win the lotto. So I don't want to sit through another year of being, dwelling in the cellar. I would much rather an entertaining season where they make some strides forwards. It gives you a reason to tune in. Maybe you finish just below the playoff berth and you luck into some good faith in the lotto. But I would be much happier if they made some moves forward and potentially put themselves in a position to capitalize next season and make the most of hopefully a better free agency. Like Joe said, there's nothing out there to make a positive impact right now.
Now, with that, it sounds like a lot's going to be draft focused, right? Number 5 pick. There's also the number 26 or 7 pick from the Keandre Miller trade. Joe, you mentioned youth movement. Steve, you mentioned, well, I'd like to see them finish high up and maybe even still have a chance at another top pick next year. But for the number 5 pick this year, are you hoping they draft a D? What are you guys looking at? And is there a prospect maybe that sticks out to you that you'd like to see in a blue shirt?
Well, for me, I think we're gonna have to draft there. We've speculated for the last 3 or 4 weeks that it'd be cool if they traded up, but we don't think we have enough oomph to make a trade. The only person I see that actually happening would be the San Jose Sharks, in the sense that they need more of a defenseman. So maybe they would be open to a trade for someone like that, or trading back to the 5th pick. But it would take a lot to move up. So then when I look at realistically who's out there, where we're going to pick. Bierhoff looks great and everything, but he kind of scares me as a Rangers player that we would actually have to develop him. He's, people say his skating's a little off. They go back and forth on what they feel about him, where I don't feel like maybe he's the right fit for the blue shirts. Where then when I look at who would probably be there, I kind of look at more of a Chase Reed, where that's more of the safer pick for the Rangers. Either way, whoever you pick is going to be scrutinized for years, especially if they, go off in the number 6 pick and they do fantastic. But for me, I think the safe pick is Chase Reed there.
I just wrote an article last week, the week before, and I thought it was really cool that former Ranger Manny Malhotra became the coach of the Canucks to maybe pick his son. It hasn't happened in decades, and that's ever happened in the league, where a coach who obviously doesn't play a big of a drafting process as they do in other sports, but I mean, maybe they even let him announce the pick. Like, that would be such a special moment for all hockey viewers that are going to be locked on the draft. I think that obviously Gavin goes number 1, and then, like Joe said, if I'm the Sharks, I'm probably looking at a defenseman, but Ivar Stenberg would be an amazing ad for them, and I don't see them passing up on the opportunity as much as a lot of teams and a lot of players might expect them. A lot of fans might want them to pick a defenseman. I feel like the natural move is to pick the best player available. We saw Greer, after they won the 2nd overall pick, say right then on the broadcast that he's looking at best player, not position. Whether that means that he ranks somebody like a Reed or a Carson Karls above Stenberg, that would be really the only chance that somebody like that falls into your lap. So with all that said, that's the top 3 skaters, top 3 forwards rather, available in the draft, picked within the top 3. So I think that there is going to be a glut of defensemen to look at. Whether someone slips to us that we necessarily want, I think, like Joe said, they make that pick at 5, and it's more than likely a defenseman. If I had to have a favorite in that, I'd probably say Carson. I feel like he's the most immediate step into the role, probably not this year, but probably the season following. That looks like he doesn't need any help to be the player that he is. And you brought up Keandre briefly, but I feel like it's just kind of is a weird spot if you're being drafted as a highly touted defenseman to come into a situation where Gavrikov and Fox already lobby that top unit. It's going to be really tough. So another year of development for whomever defenseman we pick, whether it's Reed, whether it's Verhoff. These would all be great picks, but it's going to be really tough, I think, with the way that the top of the defensive unit is structured and the way that we don't necessarily expect to be better next year, although maybe low expectations in a situation where they can only really help us would be beneficial, but that's kind of where I'm sold right now.
All right, the draft seems like pretty straightforward in the respect of like the tiering of where the prospects will be. We just talked about how there's pretty much nothing to talk about on the trade front, but with that, I'm just going to shoot here. What are your guys' thoughts about the offer sheet world? It seems like it's always talked about, and we never really see too much action with it. But do you think the Rangers could be in the fold for any offer sheets, like for Dorofeyev or any player of that caliber that's also can be offer sheeted?
I think where we are as a team, more than an offer sheet, I could see the Rangers kind of absorbing cap from somebody like the Vegas Golden Knights more than an offer sheet, because still there's not too many people out there that really, the stars are going to stay with their teams. Like, like what Sebastian Aho is one of those guys that, like, they're not letting him go. He's part of that core of that team. For me, I think the more likely scenario would be taking a trade and absorbing some cap on somebody that has a bad contract, where we have a lot of cap. I think it's 26 million and change. The salary cap is going up, where especially if we're going to be more flat of a team, where it's like, you could bump someone down to the third or fourth line that a team really needs to get rid of. So I like the idea of offer sheeting, but I don't think it's really worth it to get into a bidding war with anybody right now, especially with us not being a perennial contender.
I really like where your head's at, Matt, because I don't think that anything is off the table. I think that you have to try to navigate this situation carefully, considering that free agency is basically a no. The draft, while you're sitting in a good position, probably not something that's going to change the franchise immediately. I always harken back to the retool versus rebuild, whether that verbiage was intentional in the timeline or because we had already wrote a letter about rebuilding years prior. I feel like in this situation where you want to read it by the letter, it is a retool and we will potentially be better within the next few seasons. I think that there's a lot of ways to navigate the situation that maybe it's worth an offer sheet. Maybe it gets denied and they sign the player, whatever. Maybe it's worth a trade. Maybe it's worth a huge wholesale change. But the way that you commonly are going to restructure a team, it's through the draft, it's through a trade, it's through free agency. But with no free agency, weaponizing cap space, like Joe said, I mean, that would be a nice cheeky move to try to make it worth it for someone to throw in an additional asset. If you're going to be a bad team, which I think that most people are of the mindset the Rangers are not a playoff team currently as they're constructed, and there's almost no amount of moves they could make this year that would make me think otherwise. Also, you got to throw in the idea of Trocheck possibly leaving before the season starts. Joe had just said on our show that it's going to be really rough if you're Trocheck and you have to sit through another deadline and wait to be, have your name called essentially. So I would imagine that you're going to subtract that guy from the lineup. We already saw what removing a guy like Barclay Goodrow did to the locker room, wearing a letter and being a fourth liner. What does it change if a second liner who wears a letter is now all of a sudden not a Ranger? So I think a lot of these moves might be a step backwards to take a step forward eventually. But an offer sheet sounds great to me if you're patrolling options that are out there, weaponizing that cap space. These are things that maybe you don't, they're not the first thing to jump off the page as far as how to improve a team, but I think you have to try to take as many steps or whatever opportunity is necessary to do that.
I'm naturally an optimist too, so it's refreshing to talk to you guys that you're also optimistic, and I kind of want to lean into that. Right? You mentioned that. I thought about an offer sheet. We talked about potential with the draft. I think the reason I also wanted to talk about these things is because the common theme with Chris Drury is that whether you think the moves are right or wrong, he'll take a swing. And as you had just mentioned, Steve, if they want to make a pretty good advancement at any point along the track here, they're going to have to make a move. So is that now? Is that in the next few weeks? Is that at the draft? The Sharks obviously just traded for Kesselring, and they traded the 20th pick for him. So also, Jonny had just confirmed last week that Adam Fox was not on the table. So that was a conversation that was put to rest. It also feels like with some of the moves that general managers are tight-lipped because of the situation with Larkin and Nurse. But do you guys think they're going to come out guns blazing and make moves? Or do you think that because of the nature of the upcoming few weeks and the events at the draft and the lack of free agents, the Rangers are going to kind of sit back and maybe take a year to just let things go?
Well, I think the Rangers have a lot of possibilities to play in the sense that we have that first round pick from the Dallas Stars where I could see a more likely scenario of us trading back into the top 10 to get somebody that they really like, that maybe, you pair them with Braden Schneider and that top, what is that, the 21st pick? I'm probably mistaken on that. But that you pair that down and you try to get back into the top 10 and, then you have somebody else to develop, or, you use that as another trade bait piece to get somebody that somebody's offering that they just want out of a contract. So I think there are options. For me right now. It's kind of like the only thing I see happening first is the draft. That's like step one, like when you write an essay, that's the outline for how a summer plays out, where it's like, okay, we're going to go through the draft, see who we get, see what other teams make moves on, and then go from there. So I think that's going to really kick things off for the Rangers this year. And if we are flat, which obviously we hope they are not, if we got another high end pick, that gives another year to develop that person where, we still have some good in-house talent that we haven't even seen, like EJ Emery, and there's other people out there for within the organization that it just gives a little bit more time to.
Well, I've already made the bearish case on the market as it stands for the Rangers. So I guess to make a more bullish, optimistic case, I feel like right now, while there may not be a lot of moves, you think about how many pieces were removed from that Eastern Conference Finals team, the President's Trophy winning team. And we talked about a letter-wearing fourth liner in Barclay Goodrow, whose above replacement is the lowest in the league. So it shouldn't be hard, I think, to find someone that can give your team a little bit of a spark, a little bit of an edge, and have some leadership in the fourth line, if that's truly what is missing from the team. Talk about a guy like Trouba, who in his time with the Rangers, again, wasn't anything flashy, wasn't anything special. I do think that it's easy to sit back and look at some of the moves, because like you said with Drury, it's not necessarily the move, it's how it was handled and how they went about it as a organization. I think that a really good opportunity to rectify some of that is to deal with the Trocheck situation or the Braden Schneider situation with a little bit of tact and say, listen, we understand what we've done in the past have rubbed some people the wrong way. We want you to be a part of the conversation. Do you want to be on this team? Do you want to be on another team? We'll help facilitate it. Trocheck did mention at the end of the season, I believe it was on a TNT mid broadcast interview, about how Drury was with him every step of the way in the trade deadline. I think you have a good opportunity to kind of smooth over what scorned a lot of the players. But getting back to the players they lost, Kreider, that's going to be a hard one to replace. But if you're telling me that this team is a Kreider, Trouba, and a Goodrow removed from being one of, if not the best team, that mathematically were the best team in the regular season that year, it is really hard for me to find an argument against why couldn't they come back into playoff contention. It's going to take a lot. I've already said in this episode moments ago that I don't think that they make the playoffs if nothing changes. But there's a few short changes that you could make to give the team a little bit of momentum. I'd be interested to see if they give the backup goaltending job to Garand. I thought that he played great, albeit maybe against not the league's best talent, but he looked amazing in the 3-game stint that we saw him in. Arguably could have even won that game in his first game in debut against the Jets there. That was an amazing performance. And you have the best, if not the top 3 goalie in Igor Shesterkin, which on every single night gives you an opportunity to climb up in the standings. We saw Mika rebound and have an amazing year. I don't understand why anybody else couldn't see that and think I could do the exact same thing. Lafreniere started to step into, and even before the Panarin trade, a point per game prowess that once paired with Mika Zibanejad. And it's funny because that seems to be the trend is you get paired with Mika and your career is off to a jump start. We saw him be the direct beneficiary to 52 goals of Kreider a couple seasons ago. And we saw when JT Miller first came to the team, he had immediate chemistry with Mika Zibanejad. So part of me feels like, you add in that top line that we saw really gel towards the end of the year with Perreault and Lafreniere and the Mika line. There's a lot of good on this team. And the top pair of Falks and Gavrikov was maybe the first time that we've seen it work out just on paper the way it was supposed to. So, I mean, I do think that there's a lot of case where they could surprise everybody and we could be in a better situation come next offseason, looking back at a season that wasn't a complete loss. And I don't know, can it get worse than third worst record in the league? Not by much. So I'm hoping that, analytically, I think this is what's going to happen. Optimistically, I think that the Rangers could turn some heads this upcoming season if a few things go in their favor.
All right. And lastly, what's a hot take for the draft or for free agency? One that maybe you've leaned on. I know we kind of talked about it already, but with this episode coming out 2 days before the draft, I'm curious if you guys have any hot takes for basically the off season that wraps in about a 7-day period.
Well, I think you already got my hot takes that I think we are going to trade back into the top 10. I think that's my hot take for the draft. I got a hot take not related to those questions that Laugh is going to hit close to 40 goals this year. That's my hot take.
I love it. All right, and Joe, we're going to revisit that before the season starts. Steve, what about you?
I think that even though I just listed a bunch of players that I would be very comfortable drafting, I think that the Rangers somehow go off the board and pick a guy that we are all immediately shocked that they didn't go with the layup opportunity. And like Joe said, they'll be compared because they were pick 6 every single year until that pick materializes. Maybe not a name that doesn't exist on the top draft board, but the way I see it, McKenna, Stenberg, Malholtra likely to his dad at 3. The Blackhawks pick the best defenseman available, and then the Rangers are left sitting pretty with 3 great options. They're going to pick someone that everyone loses their absolute mind about. That's my hot take related to the draft. And my hot take not related to the draft because Joe went there. I still make the Keandre Miller trade 10 out of 10 times. I don't care that he won't come.
Oh, man. All right. You know what? It's always great catching up with you guys. And I think we got to have you on before, at some point after the draft free agency, before the season, because I love to revisit these and have you guys on for a little more time. But thanks for coming on.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you. I mean, you're always so kind with what you say about our show, man. It is amazing to be able to reconnect with you specifically. We always talk about, it was only a couple months ago. I know I want to have Matt back on the show too. We got to let it breathe a little bit. But the thing about you, man, is we could talk about Rangers all day long with you. You're a wealth of opportunity as far as where your career is headed. The sky's the limit, man. Just keep doing what you're doing. I love you calling games live and just kind of digging into the bag of all these other things that you have to offer this world, and specifically in this niche. So credit to you, man. Love seeing where you're headed as well, and looking forward to doing this again. Our turn to host next time.
For sure. And I appreciate you guys a ton. You were the first people to reach out to me when I was reporting on the team in 23-24 to come on your show. So that'll always stick with me. And listen, you guys are the best. And for anyone listening, please right now, go to Broadway Block, follow them on IG. You probably already do if you're on social media, because the content is the best and the lightest, the most fun. So with that, we're going to turn to our next guest, and we'll see you soon. Welcome to Puck Talk CS. I'm here with Stat Boy Steve. Now we're keeping these quick, we're keeping these tight, and we're keeping it specific. Steve, it's so great to have you on. Like you talked about just before we got on air, I talked to you in November. It feels like a second ago, yet we've endured a lot since then. But now we're talking draft free agency. Steve, your department, European players, I know you also mentioned to me that you get some flack for focusing on that, but I actually think this is a really important dimension for all the interviews we have here. So let's start right off the bat. 5th overall, 26th overall. Where do you want to start, with 26 or 5?
No, we'll start with 26 and then we'll end with 5 because that's 5 is the more interesting part. We'll finish high, so to speak. So, and yeah, look, everyone gravitates towards players they see play more frequently, right? So, living in Europe, I see a lot of the Swedish league, the Finnish league, the KHL, the Champions Hockey League. So yeah, I do tend to focus a little bit more on that. I'm also a Seattle Thunderbirds fan, so I see some WHL hockey. But yeah, there's definitely some names there that hopefully will be available at 26, which is the pick that we got from Carolina for Keandre Miller, which turns out to be the Dallas pick. So look, to me personally, I would always go for a forward in the first round, simply because it's a numbers game to me. You can get really good defensemen later in the draft, right? Keith Yandel was a 4th round pick. I think Shea Weber was a 2nd round pick. You can get really good defensemen later in the draft. It's a lot less likely you get really good forwards later in the draft. You have to really strike gold in the 4th or 5th round with a guy like Jesper Bratt to get something good out of the later rounds with forwards. Defensemen are a little easier to find because they slip through the cracks. They need longer to develop. So with 1st round picks, I tend to focus on forwards unless there's a defenseman that really jumps out. for the 26th overall pick, a couple of players that I would definitely be excited about. One of them is probably one of the biggest risers in the draft the last 12 months. Wyatt Cullen, son of former Ranger Matt Cullen. He played for the USA under 18s in the World Juniors, played for the NTDP, and is going to the University of Minnesota at NCAA. So it's a path that the Rangers are very familiar with and seemingly are looking for in a player. If he goes to college, you get 4 years to decide, when to sign him. Gives them a little bit of flexibility. But yeah, Wyatt Cullen is such a dynamic player. He's still only 17. He's turning 18 in like early September. He's going to be one of the youngest players in his draft class. And he's such a good skater. He's grown a lot in the last 12 months too. So I think he's 6'1", 180 pounds, which is exactly where you want the guy to be. If it's under 180, it's a little bit on the lighter side. But yeah, Wyatt Cullen as a late riser, he perfectly honest, he might not even be there at 26, but based on the rankings I've seen, he could be in the conversation there. So he's the first one I would like to call out for that pick. The second one is Tomas Shrenko from Slovakia, who's a center, a little smaller, 5'11", really good skater, really good puck movement as well. And what stands out to me about him is that he plays professional hockey in Slovakia and was close to a point per game as a 17-year-old. He turned 18 early in his draft class, November, but yeah, right-handed shot. There's definitely a lot to like there. Plays for the same team that Adam Sikora played for, by the way, so there's maybe some familiarity there too. But overall, just another guy that if you want to go for upside is definitely a guy to look for. Tomas Shrenko from Slovakia. And then I was going to do 3 players, but I'm kind of sneaking in 2 players here for the third. They're twins, Liam and Marcus Ruck, who play in the WHL for the Medicine Hat Tigers. They're not as good as the Sedin twins, but they remind me of the Sedin twins so much. Their numbers are almost identical. They both had 4 points in 5 games in the World Hockey Classic for Canada. 100 plus points, both for the Medicine Hat Tigers this season. You're probably only going to be able to get one because they are projected to go late in the first round. But if you can get one of these, the talent is definitely there. And I think the last 2-3 years with Chris Drury, with the overhaul he's done for this team, the one thing that this team is lacking right now is just pure talent. They have guys that, they have the physicality, the grit, the forecheck. That's all fine. At some point, you need some talent. You need players to put the puck in the net, right? Gabe Perreault is a perfect example of that. But if you have multiple picks in the first round, I rather just swing for the fences and try to get a guy with high upside. Yeah, you might fail. The guy might not make it. But I rather do this than trade for a guy who has third line upside. You can get those guys in the third and fourth round. There's no reason for me, at least, to settle for a guy who is going to top out as what they call a high floor, top out as a third line player. Just swing for the fences. And that's with pick 26, right?
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to pick 5, that's even more so the case. And for pick 5, to me, there's actually 3 players that would be really interesting for the Rangers. And there are 2 defensemen in that range that, for me, are the exception, where you go for them because of how good they are. And it depends on what kind of defenseman you want. There's Carson Carles, who is an offensive guy, was over a point per game in the WHL, going to the University of North Dakota, which is a really good program, by the way, for developing players. They have
EJ Emery there.
EJ Emery's playing there. Jake Sanderson played there, if I remember correctly.
That's correct.
They have a really good program, really strong program when it comes to developing players, when you get a guy with high upside in the top 5 and he goes to a school like the University of North Dakota, I have no concerns about being in the right place. Of course, development is still a bit of a toss-up, bit of a gamble, but it won't be for a lack of resources. Let's put it that way. So if you're looking for an offensive guy, Carson Carles of the Prince George Cougars that he played for the past 2 seasons would be the guy. If you're looking for a minute eater, a guy that plays second pair, first pair, all situations, defense, offense, penalty kill, power play. If you want a guy that plays that for you, that might not score, that might not put up 50 points for you, but is a really stellar guy defensively for you, then Albert Smits from Latvia is the guy in that range. So there's 2 defensemen there. Depending on what they're looking for, if they want a defenseman, there's 2 completely different trajectories for these guys. Smits played for Latvia in the Olympics, the World Juniors, and the World Championships this season. Plays professionally in Finland. Just not as flashy. Like I said, the offense might not be there from him, but at every level he's played at, they trust him to, play late in the game, to defend the lead, kill penalties. If you're looking for a guy that takes up a lot of minutes, like they've done with, a guy like that they're trying to do with Braden Schneider, if that's the guy you're looking for, then Albert Smits is the one. And then my personal pick for the 5th overall selection, and I'm probably going to get a bit of flack for this, but Viggo Bjork out of Sweden, to me, if we are assuming that the top 4 in any order is McKenna, Stenberg, Reed, and Malhotra, to me, the best player available would be Viggo Bjork. I think he's 5'10", 5'11". I don't even care about how tall he is. The way he plays, the way he played in the World Championships for Sweden, one of the youngest players, or maybe the youngest player to ever play for Sweden in the World Championships. Played on the first line, centering Stenberg and Lucas Raymond, went up against Sidney Crosby. Even Sidney Crosby was full of praise after the game about Viggo Bjork.
I think they like traded sticks or something, if I'm not mistaken.
There was definitely a moment after the game where they met in the, I think they call it the green room, where they do like the post-game interviews. And Crosby's 5'11", and they looked about the same size, but this kid is still only 18, and he's already playing professionally in Sweden, which is a big plus for such a young guy. Was one of the better players on the Sweden team that won gold in the World Juniors back in January. And like I said, the fact that he was able to make the Swedish World Championship team, which is full professionals. You're going up against Evan Bouchard, Macklin Celebrini, Sidney Crosby, Matthew Tkachuk, Will Borger. You're going up against like seasoned NHLers. That's very encouraging. And I know it's not a guarantee, because we've all seen Kakko in 2019 and Laine in 2016. But I'd rather have a guy play well in this tournament than be invisible, right? And again, to me, especially when it comes to the 5th overall pick, you drop 2 spots in the lottery. You need to go for the guy with the most upside. You cannot settle for a guy who's going to be like a 2-way guy in your third line. And personally, if they draft Viggo Bjork, I'd be thrilled. Carson Carles, Albert Smits, I'd be just as happy, because to be perfectly honest, the Rangers need everything. We always talk about the Rangers need centers. They need wingers. They need defensemen. The only thing they don't need is probably a goalie, because they have Igor for 7 more years, and Dylan Garand is now the backup. I think they're good for goalies. You can pick a couple in the later rounds, but 5th overall, just go with upside. Go with the guy who you think has the highest potential. That, to me, is the key here.
All right, so that's what you're looking for, and I love that, because I actually think that may contrast from some of the other interviews that we have. So I love that approach. And something about what you actually were just talking about with the 5 and 26 pick just came to mind. That reminds me of the Elias Anderson, Philip Hedl picks. You had the 721, I believe 21 was Hedl.
721.
They went with safety first, risk later. But as you had mentioned, at this point, the team needs anything that can get them goals and scoring and talent.
Yeah.
They have their Will Cooley. You have, I mean, so many bottom sixers coming into camp next year. I like the way you articulated that. And I guess to end on a high note, is there an encouraging stat from last season that you thought of or that you've kind of beat the drum on, or is it really a lot of negative, dark stuff?
For the Rangers, Lafreniere ended on a high note. I need to see more. I need to see it for a full season before I really, start praising him. But it's better than not showing it. Let's put it that way. I think Perreault is going to be really good for a full season. He needed time. At the start of the season, needed some time in the AHL. But the last 3 months, he was really one of their best players. And still, it's my biggest criticism of Mike Sullivan is taking Perreault off of the first power play unit. That was criminal. I'm sorry, you have nothing to play for. He should have been on the first unit. There's definitely something to like about this Rangers team. My concern is that the better players are on the wrong side of 30. And aside from Perreault, help is not on the way. Right? They have no prospects currently in the system that I could envision 3 years from now to be bona fide top 6 forwards or bona fide top 4 defensemen. Fortescue might get there. You have talented guys like Laba. He might jump up into like a second line role, maybe. But there's a lot of question marks. There's a lot of maybes. And this is why this 5th overall pick is so crucial. And we can talk all we want about which player they should draft. It doesn't even matter what we want. Like, they can draft whoever. The only thing is they cannot mess this up. They cannot mess up a 5th round pick where the organization is right now. Right? JT Miller and Mika Zibanejad are 33. Trocheck's on the way out. He's definitely getting traded this summer. Shesterkin is in his 30s. Fox is getting there. Gavrikov is 30 now. He has 6 years left. This is it. Like, if you mess this up with a 5th overall pick, if you get a guy who doesn't make the team or is like a Manny Malhotra 4th liner, you have failed. I would love Vigo Bjork personally, but if they go with Tynan Lawrence and Tynan Lawrence turns into a 95-point player in the NHL, great. All I want is for this pick to be successful.
You want impact, immediate impact.
No, not immediate impact. I would rather get a guy who puts up 100 points 5 years from now than a guy who makes the team next year and contributes right away. Because here's the other unpopular opinion that I have. I don't think this core of Ranger players is going to win a cup. I think the next core, starting in 2029, 2030, led by Lafreniere, Perreault, an aging Fox, and hopefully other players that are currently on the way, is going to have a shot. Because I just don't think Zibanejad, JT Miller, Vincent Trocheck, Vlad Gavrikov are going to be part of a team that's going to be good enough to even make it to the Stanley Cup final. And maybe I'm pessimistic, but look, I've watched the Rangers since the early 90s. I've seen them reach 5 conference finals in the last 15 years. 2012, 2014, 2015, 2022, 2024. Reaching the conference final is not a goal anymore. Winning the President's Trophy is not a goal anymore. That's not something I'm going to celebrate. They need to win a cup. And I just don't think that this team is cut out for it at this point. So I'm already looking for the next wave of players 5-6 years from now.
Well, we will be keeping up with your feed on Twitter. I mean, a must follow for the stats, for all of this information. I really appreciate that you took the time to come on, Steve.
Yeah, my pleasure. And we'll be in touch.